Okay, today we're going to be working with the paraphrasing strategy, and I've picked out a very, very small article about an incident. Uh, it's actually based on a movie. Well, the movie is based on this incident, but the movie is nothing like reality, which is Hollywood likes to dramatize things. So I'm just going to dive right in and read the first paragraph, and then we'll summarize the main idea. Uh, As a submarine broached only 700 yards from the USS Chatillon, the escort opened fire with all automatic weapons that would bear and swept the U-boat's decks. The USS Pillsbury, the USS Jenks, and two F-6 Wildcats overhead all joined the shooting and added to the intense barrage. Wounded in the torrent of fire, and believing that his submarine had been mortally damaged by the Chatillon's depth charges, the commanding officer of U-505 quickly ordered his crew to abandon ship. So quickly was this command obeyed that scuttling measures were left incomplete, and the submarine's engines continued to run. The jammed rudder caused the partially submerged U-505 to circle to the right at a speed near 7 knots. Seeing the U-boat turning toward him, the commanding officer of the Chatillon ordered a single torpedo fired at the submarine in order to forestall what appeared to be a similar attack on himself. The torpedo passed ahead of the U-505, which by now appeared to be completely abandoned. About 2 minutes later, the escort division commander ordered ceasefire and called in the Pillsbury's boarding party. So, in this first paragraph, we have a naval battle shaping up, the particulars of which are not terribly important to understanding what's going on here, but three U.S. naval vessels, along with aerial support, have basically cornered a submarine, a U-boat. They have damaged the ship, and the captain of that submarine has ordered his crew to abandon ship, but he did so without making sure that measures were in place to see that the ship sunk rather than fell into enemy hands, which was the protocol in that kind of situation. Uh, Still, they did a few things right. They had the rudder turned hard one way. Rudder steers the ship, so they had the steering turned one way so that the ship goes in a circle, which makes it harder to board. Uh, there was a little bit of confusion aboard the American ships, which continued to fire. Whoops, we're scrolling down. Continued to fire, and when they realized what was going on, they decided, hey, we should go ahead and capture this thing. So they call in a boarding party, a group of sailors to get on the ship, take it over, and put it under control so that they can keep it, which was the goal, the ultimate goal in a naval battle. It did not happen very often. And here we have in the next paragraph, we'll see something relating to that. The U-505 was not only the first vessel captured by the U.S. Navy since the War of 1812, but also yielded code books, which unlocked the missing key to deciphering Germany's unbreakable code enigma. The capture of code books on U-505 allowed Allied cryptanalysts to break the special coordinate code in enciphered German messages and determine more precise locations for U-boat operating areas. In addition to directing hunter-killer task groups to these locations, these coordinates enabled Allied convoy commanders to route shipping away from known U-boat locations, greatly inhibiting the effectiveness of German submarine patrols. The material captured from U-505 arrived at Bletchley Park on 20th of June 1944, and in addition to the coordinate code, included the regular and officer settings for June 1944, the current short weather codebook, and the short signal codebook and big room tables due to come into effect in July and August respectively. So this was a big deal because not only had the U.S. Navy not captured a ship in over 100 years, but they got these code books, which up until that point they had been unable to break naval intelligence codes, which were ships at sea would send back to base, and then the base would send messages back in code. And this allowed the Navy to read these codes as they were going back and forth. And not only did it allow them to do that, but the coordinate code allowed them to determine precise locations for the submarines that the Germans were operating. So while the first thing is hunter-killer task groups were dispatched to these locations, they sent attack vessels, battleships and destroyers to destroy these German submarines. That also allowed us to, when mapping which routes merchant shipping or supply ships would take from the U.S. to Europe, it allowed us to set course around these areas so that merchant shipping, lightly armed merchant shipping, would not run into a submarine that could sink it. This wasn't the only good thing they found. They also found the code books for the next month and the month after that. So they were pretty much set up for the next 2 months. Having your enemy's code book is something similar to, on the football field, having knowing what plays the enemy is going to call, or the opposing team is going to call, because you know how to effectively plan for those plays, and then you can stop them at every turn. And that's effectively what happened. That was pretty much the end of the war in the Atlantic, was finding these books, because they were able to sink so many that they were unable to continue the war in that part. And so in June of 1944, around the time of D-Day, they were pretty much set up that there wasn't going to be any more. There wasn't going to be a naval war for much longer. Okay, so the final paragraph. When U-505 was donated to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, she had been thoroughly stripped during the years she sat neglected alongside the dock at the Portsmouth Navy Yard. Admiral Gallery proposed a possible solution and had Major Lohr contact all of the German manufacturers who had supplied the components and parts that went into her, in hopes of restoring her to near new condition. The Major expected at best responses that boiled down to "go to hell." However, to his and the museum's surprise, every company supplied the requested parts without charge. Most included letters that said in effect, "We are sorry that you have our U-boat, but since she's going to be there for many years, we want her to be a credit to German technology." So the ship was donated as a museum ship. It is still at the Museum of Science and History in Chicago. And for years it had sat, and parts had been taken from it for this or that purpose to be examined, because some of the naval technology was different from ours, so it was nice to get different looks at all that. So when they wanted to put it in this museum, they needed parts, because they had no idea how to replicate what parts went where. Over the years, things had been lost. So they contact these German manufactured German companies that had produced the parts originally, and they were expecting some sour grapes to, tell them where they can get off, but to their surprise, the thieves were given for free, and while they weren't happy that their submarine had been captured, they wanted it to be. They still took pride in their work, and they wanted people to see how proud they were of the work they did, so that they were willing to give these parts for free, so that people could be in awe of what they created. And it really was a great many technological innovations aboard those ships. So that is the paraphrasing strategy. If you're not familiar, the movie that is not really based on this, but is U-571, and no Matthew McConaughey here. So that is my video.